Thank you, Deanna. So tonight I have asked, I'm trying to get to the right page. I'm on an iPad. Sorry if it seems a little wonky. Tonight we have the good fortune of hearing from a gentleman that I seem to have lucked upon in Destin, Florida at a conference, and then lucked upon a few times more. And I am surprised at his depth. So not surprised, just pleasantly surprised that there's more to be had at this level. So with that, I'll let Rick begin.
Thank you, Dawn. My name is Rick. I'm an alcoholic. I really appreciate being invited to share tonight. Before I got sober, I got uninvited a lot of places. So this is kind of an offset to that sort of thing. I thought we would start out with kind of a little bit of course, emotional sobriety is based in spirituality, as I understand it. And it's common knowledge that the temples of the brain, the temples up here are spiritual centers. And the circulatory system in people's bodies, that is the healing process where the blood circulates and brings new cells and new life. So I wanted to start off on a group participation thing to try to set the spiritual tone. So if y'all would do this with me, place each palm on each temple of your head. And I'm watching the Hollywood Square, so I'll know any scholars. And now repeat after me. I now have all my problems in my hands. Amen. That's where all of these problems of emotional sobriety come from. They come from in my head. They're not externals. I've come to understand that my problems are not coming at me, they're coming from me. And so, and thanks to Dawn and Chris and some of the other members here to allow me and trust me to do a little screen sharing with you this evening. And this is directly taken from Bill's letter when he was talking about where the sources of his problems were coming from, these dependencies and such as that. It's titled Basic Instincts of Life, which create self. They can be also called desires. I'm not saying where they're attributed from, whether they're God-given, if we're acquiring them through growing up, through society. But the social instinct, the desire for companionship, prestige, self-esteem, our pride, how we think about ourselves, either high or low, our personal relationships, and our ambitions. Bill talked about a lot of these things in his letter that were detractions or challenges for emotional sobriety. And the way that they become detractions is when self takes a hit on one of these instincts, like our social instinct, it responds with resentments, fears, or harms done to myself or others. And that self, the ego, if you will, is dominated by society and people in it over those things. Then we've got this other instinct, which is for security. And we'd like to be able to have some material things. We'd like to have emotional security about people that love us, and we don't want to be overly dependent on them or they on us, but our ambitions regarding our place in the material world. If self feels like that's being threatened, the book says fancied or real, then it responds with not emotional sobriety, but resentments, fears, and harms done to others. This disturbs my emotional balance when that happens. The sex instinct, whether it's acceptable according to society standards or my own, the hidden sex instinct, or the sneaky snake ambitions of the instincts. If that feels threatened, once again, emotional sobriety flies out the window. I'm into resentment. I'm into fear. I'm into harms or hurts done to myself or others. And so on these desires, what I've found is that they start out innocent for me as a desire, and then they escalate to a demand. I demand it. I demand security. I demand material things. I demand social standing. I demand sexual fulfillment or what have you. And it goes from a demand to the final stage. And this is whenever emotional sobriety is just a faint memory, when it becomes an obsession. If I'm obsessed with these things, there's never going to be enough because I lack power. And so I have to identify these things. And Bill was talking about these were blockages to the love channel, the channel of love where we exchange love with one another. Were being blocked. Uh, they may manifest as depression, they may manifest as raging. But I have to take an active part today if I want to be emotionally sober, to identify my desires, know what they are, and try to pull them in line with what I think God's will would be for me. If I'm lazy and do not identify my desires will identify me. And that's not a good thing, because that's the self-will run riot. And once again, that's the emotional, called the brainstorm, the storm within the brain. When my brain is storming, it's not like an IBM executive. It's storming from emotional disturbances. So I have to be mindful of what are my desires. But through these steps and through the things I've learned in AA and also a lot of outside reading, I've found that there can be a peace of mind that comes regardless of what the externals are. These, like the difference between believing in God and trusting in God. I can tell you all I believe in God right now. But where the rubber meets the road is, do I trust God? And those, I've come to find out those are not the same thing. It's like when the great Walinda he was a high wire artist. The whole family was, but they stretched a tightrope across the stadium, and he had this wheelbarrow. He used it for balancing, and the stadium's full, and he's the halftime show, and he pushes the wheelbarrow across the stadium on the tightrope. And when he got to the other side, the crowd roared, and the announcer was whipping them into a frenzy and saying, "Now, who believes that he can push that wheelbarrow back across the tight wire?" And the crowd roared. And he says, "Okay, now who has enough faith and trust to get in the wheelbarrow?" And it was silent. There's a big difference between believing in it and having enough faith and trust to get in the wheelbarrow with God. That's an action statement rather than just me banging my lips together with a profession of a belief. So I have to really be committed to this, is what I'm trying to say. It's about a commitment to understand that we have this higher power that will offset our lack of power. This is just kind of for giggles, okay? So we don't get too intense all through this. Whenever, I don't know about y'all, but I'm still a spiritual baby. And whenever in my spiritual infancy, this is like designed to show how I got here to AA, what the progression of the lack of emotional sobriety was. It goes like this. I'm there in my emotional sobriety crib, asleep. A lot of us hear a lot of phrases about, sleepwalking or not being awakened. And so I've got this mobile hanging over my crib, and I'll pound on this one on the left for a little while. Separation from God on self-will. and then I lack power. Then I get really tired of that. Maybe I'll just move over to this other one in the middle about I become restless, irritable, and discontented. And I'm making up my mind. I'm going to go on a quest for ease and comfort. Oh, I'm not really ready for a quest today. I think I'll just go back to lack of power. Or maybe I might and make a pass at this third side over here to make it spin around. Am I going to drink or am I going to look for at one-ment? Thy will be done. So when this started out, this idea, and Mary helped me with this, thank you, MT. It was very linear, but she pointed out to me that it's fluid. We're back and forth for all these things. But my experience has been I was separated from God on self-will. I lacked power and I become restless, irritable, and discontent. That's where emotional sobriety was missing, restless, irritable, and discontent. And I went on the quest for ease and comfort where I wound up drinking whiskey instead of trying to do a thy will be done. But the good news is thy will be done is available to me today. And that is a prime tool that is available for us to use, or at least for me to use, to get this emotional sobriety and balance. Pulling my self-will in line with God's will solve the spiritual malady. And, another thing where I jumped the tracks, I like to call it the third eye. That's another old time, spiritual thing. And not to make fun, but the third eye. And I like digital projectors. I do a slideshow sometimes on history and use a digital projector back whenever we met live. But I've got this projector here and it projects a movie out from my head as what I think is the world and the people in it. It's not real. It's my inner fantasy, but I'm playing my movie out. I'm making a world. And in my mind's eye, I call it Ricktopia. It's the way things ought to be. And so I'm watching the world that I've made up, how it ought to be. And you know how that story ends. I'm handing out scripts and nobody's following their lines. And so I crank up the judge-o-matic. You're not doing it right. And the critic enters the picture. The critic just kills my spiritual base for emotional sobriety. But see, I'm the one that's doing it. I'm projecting the movie out there, and all you players are blowing your lines and not playing the part. Whenever I was young, I had a real good ramp up for alcoholism and the personality disorder that goes with it. We had the weekly reader, and there was a section on the weekly reader when I was in elementary school called What is Wrong with This Picture? And that was my best subject. I could tell you if there was an earring missing on the lady's ear, if if anything that was wrong with the picture, I was really good at it. And so as I grew older and people weren't following the lines on the world that I made up, that was how it was supposed to be, then I just went overboard with telling everybody and everything what was wrong with everything, except for me, because it all starts with me. So it couldn't be what's wrong with me. And this ruined my emotional sobriety. Even after I quit drinking whiskey, whenever I stayed on this, what's wrong with this picture? Oh, and one of the ugliest ones is spiritual pride. Get some years under your belt and then start casting stones at the fellowship. They're doing it all wrong. Here are these people staying sober. They may not be doing it exactly the way that I was taught, but their tree is bearing fruit. So who am I to say they're doing it all wrong? That's just the critic once again that's entering in to steal my emotional sobriety, my peace of mind. And this critic thing is my personality. It's my ego. But the good news is there's another part of me that is not the critic, it's the soul. Now, this is personal belief, but I believe that the soul part of me is what interfaces with my creator. And I can go to that spot and talk to the creator aside from this personality that is the Florida businessman in the sun complaining about the sad state of affairs and all of that. Oh, personal, retired, Florida, semi-retired. But I have to understand that this inner fantasy world that I've created is not the outer reality world. And that's where my emotional sobriety goes out the window, because the outside world, the objective world, doesn't match up with my inner fantasy world. And all kinds of friction and rub happens because what my inner fantasy is not showing up in the outer world. Now, if you're having trouble with this, think about this. How many of us here, before we got sober, always felt like there was a good person inside of us? It just wasn't showing up. I didn't let go of that. I always thought I was a good person. Just these felonies and all this legal trouble and all that, that's not the real me, you know. But the inner fantasy world couldn't match up to the outward reality of what's going on. So this is when my sponsor took me aside, and whenever I was being critical of everything that was wrong in the world, include mostly the people in it, he said, "Boy, would you rather take on the job of carpeting the whole world, or would you like to learn to wear shoes?" Well, it sure would be a better place if I could get everything carpeted, but I think that's probably beyond my capacity. So I guess I better learn how to wear shoes. He was not physically shoes, not white boots or anything like that, but just ways to get through. Sorry, I thought I'd slipped that in there. Ways to navigate through the world without being bruised all the time, you know, where I'm not so vulnerable. So I said, okay, I'd like to learn how to wear shoes. And the first thing that he said was, we're going to have a little session here where he gave me a buzzword. And it turns out there was a man up in Tennessee that this was his answering machine. He sponsored a lot of people. And his answering machine message was real blunt. He said, it would beep and his voice would come on and it would say, "It's not about them. Leave a message." Boy, that cuts through the chase, you know, and I'm wanting to do the wind up and the pitch and what they did and what they said and just, it's not about them. Leave a message. So that was the starting point. It's not about them. So now we're going to have a little humble pie and say, my troubles of my own making. And the old man said, that's great. That's great news. Don't take that as a big chore, because if it's about them, then we have absolutely no power. You have no power about them. It starts on the inside. And this critic had just gone berserk, and it was destroying my serenity and my emotional sobriety. And I had a lot of people that were on my grudge list, if you will, that I had trouble forgiving. They did, you know, there are a couple, two or three that I considered heinous. I'm not even sure what the full definition of that word is, but really bad. Forgiveness. And then I tried to start practicing forgiveness with all this plethora of people that were robbing my spiritual balance and my emotional sobriety. And I'm not doing any good on it. I'm not a good forgiver. My memory's too good for that. And I didn't get traction with it. Then I read some writings from this Jesuit priest named Anthony DeMello. I've learned a lot from him. And he said, see through this to where it comes from. What's the need for forgiveness? Where does that come from? And the answer is, because I have passed judgment on them. So whenever I quit judging and condemning these people, my forgiveness list, it shrunk. It almost vanished. So if I'll focus more on stopping condemning the people that are on my grudge list, then I don't have to worry about trying to forgive them because there's nothing to forgive. Whenever I started to get a little traction on that, my emotional sobriety got a lot better because I wasn't being dominated by those people anymore. And I took responsibility for not condemning them. Now, I live in Florida and we have citrus fruit down here, not near as much as we used to. But one of my teachers said, Rick, you live down there. He was a full-blood Choctaw Indian from Ardmore, Oklahoma. We called him Heavenly Henry. Heavenly said, Rick, you ought to know this, but down there in Florida, we're all fruit inspectors, every one of us. And he was trying to teach me watchfulness, observation. And he said, you look at an orange and you say, that's a bruised orange. You pick up another one and you say, this one's perfect skin on the outside. He said, we're just inspecting fruit, but we go the extra mile and say that bruised orange, it needs to be thrown into a pit of fire and destroyed. And that one that has really nice skin needs to be sent to the gas house and put some wax on it and sold at a premium as a peel and eat orange at the grocery store. And we're placing values on them. He said, the truth of the matter is, don't be judging. The bruised oranges go to the juice factory. People love orange juice. So who are you to say it has no value? So if I run across bruised oranges in my daily travels with people, I try not to condemn them and say they have no value. They have their place. We all have our place. And not to put too much value on what appears to be cosmetically correct when it may actually be really sour. So that allows me to still be a fruit inspector, but not a judge, jury, and execution squad. That's helped me because I felt guilty about being a fruit inspector. And like maybe I was falling down on my spiritual program. And he said, no, that's called awareness. Being watchful that the thing that sours it, the things that turns it against the spiritual principle is whenever you become the judge. So I'm trying to be more of an observer than anything else. I had a sobriety brother, and the question begs to be asked, well, how you do that? Let's get into how, Rick, let's go for solution now. How you do that? Well, I had a sobriety brother whose wife was really angry with him. And she called our mutual sponsor and said, I need some time to talk to you. And he said, well, come out to the farm. And she had her husband drive her to the farm and drop her off. And she's all prepared to tell on my sobriety brother. She's going to just load our sponsor up with everything he's been doing that's wrong and snitch him off, and report him to the sponsor. And she said, he sat there quietly and listened to me and listened until I finished all my tattletelling. And when it was over, then I asked him, well, what have you heard or what should I do? And he reared back and smiled. And he said, Susie, the solution to this, the source of it and the solution to it is you've stopped doing your 10th step. And she was like, no, that's not what I came here to hear. I wanted to tell on him and I wanted you to be his sponsor and straighten him up and have him to. He said, no, this is about your 10th step. This isn't about his behavior. So when we get into this continuing to take personal inventory, I've found that 10th step work, especially some work that I've done over the last couple of months, is really the key to emotional sobriety. It's not about them. I shut down the judge-o-matic, and I've learned to live maybe just one step back. I lived so much of my life, drunk and sober, like the little boy that had no money with his nose pressed up against the glass at the candy store. I want it really bad and I'm laser focused on it. But whenever I'm living in the first person with my nose pressed up against life in the three-dimensional world, all my peripheral vision goes away. I can't see anything other than what I'm obsessed on. Just like booze. When I was obsessed on booze, I couldn't see anything else. I couldn't see consequences. I couldn't see relationships. I was laser focused on it. So this inventory process, this watchfulness, just taking a step back. One of my friends calls it take a helicopter ride. Jump on the helicopter and go up to about 500 feet and look at it from a detached point of view instead of being right in the middle of it. Wow, that space is the pause when agitated or doubtful. That's the God space. Whenever I am starting to get riled up or fearful, pause. Give God a little room to come in and then watch it. I like that concept about the helicopter because some of the readings I've done recently said there's if it's like a cloud in the sky can see the cloud, but the cloud has no idea what the sky is. So Mary Thayer says that what's above can see what's below, but what's below can never see what's above. So I want to try to get more to that above state so I am not affected and dominated by the world and the people in it. So I can get that emotional sobriety. Bear with me. This is the last of the graphics, but Dr. Silkworth talked about some sort of moral psychology is needed for these drunks. You know, our personalities are whipped out of shape. Think about how many times that we lived as reactionaries. I know that I did it a lot. I would feel something, act out, and then think about it later. Oh, what am I thinking? Our big book says, of what is he thinking? You know, when he goes straight to the bar. And there's a sequencing that the big book lays out. This is one of the hidden secrets, I think, of the big book. That is the proper sequence about how to have emotional sobriety. And it goes like this. This is kind of I call it a medicine wheel. Call it what you'd like. But this is a sequencing of think, acting, and feel. This recent study we've been doing, it says, ask yourself the question repeatedly or often. What am I thinking? What am I doing? What am I feeling? And observe those things. Be cognizant of them. But there's a sequence I've found out. If I feel and go against the grain and act out immediately, then the last thing happens is I think about it. Oh, what was I thinking? And then that sends me into another negative feeling, and I get in the negative energy field and the negative energy whirlpool, and I feel something and act out again and think about it later. No spiritual peace, no emotional sobriety. And I can go around sleepwalking, and come to with a 10-step checkup that says, Rick, what are you thinking? Oh, I'm lost in thought. Well, pick an action. And if I'll choose, this is where some people call it do the next right thing. And as a result of the actions, that's when I get the feeling, the desired feeling. Or if I'm feeling bad, negative, think about what I need to be doing or what I need to stop doing, act on it, and then the feeling comes. Now, this is not pop psychology. This comes straight out of the big book when it comes to step number 5. We thought well before taking this step, who we're going to take it with. The next thing is we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every cranny of the past. Act. And then we get to those wonderful 5th step feelings promises. It's just a gush, an outpouring. We feel the drink problem has been lifted. We feel we're walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So I have to take these 10-step questions and make sure they're in the proper sequence. If I want the feeling, then that comes as a offspring, if you will, of the action that I took that I thought about ahead of time. So I've gotten a lot of emotional balance from trying to utilize the right sequencing whenever I'm doing I call it the walk around 10 step. If I'm asking myself, what are you thinking? What are you doing? What are you thinking about doing? What are you feeling? Then if I'll get that sequence, it's kind of like a form of moral psychology for me. And I get a lot of emotional balance from that. And so um, I'm not so much at war with the world, the people in it, and going around unhappy. And that way it's an empowering thing. I can ask God to direct my thoughts. I can ask what the next right thing would be. And then the feelings are byproducts. They are not the steering wheel for my life. I do not steer it by feelings. I let the feelings be the motivation. If I have bad feelings and don't have emotional sobriety, the feelings are the motivators to think about what needs to be done or stop doing and take the right action. So feelings have got their place, but there is motivation, not as the decision-making process. That was hard for me to learn. And it's a new shift because as a drunk that felt something, made a knee-jerk reaction and thought about it later, I was known as a reactionary. I don't know if y'all were ever reactionaries. I was not responsible. The end game for emotional sobriety today is to be responsive after that pause when agitated or doubtful. That's a responsible person that makes a response. A reaction is a knee-jerk response that is directly in, that's not thought through. It didn't have that time to let God in to help with choosing the action. So our book makes several suggestions, like in Fred, the accounting story, he talked about several lifelong conceptions had to be thrown out the window. And Carl Jung, a great benefactor of psychology and theosophy, he said, we have to do sort of I call it old ideas inventory. We have to look at what the old ideas I was hanging on to, maybe they got programmed into me by well-meaning people that are not sustainable, and let go of the old ideas. The very first one, this is not etheric stuff. The first one is the old idea that I could control and enjoy drinking. That has to be replaced. I don't want to have that conflict going on about, well, just maybe, or feeling like I'm deprived of something because I cannot drink alcohol, instead of saying, oh, thank God, I understand it's a poison, not a beverage. So I get a lot of emotional sobriety from that. This was one for me that came from, I grew up in Oklahoma, and this was very dominant in the social order out there. It's now called sum zero thinking. That means if you win something, I lose. And that creates a lot of coveting. It creates a lot of competition. That it's a teeter-totter. If my pile gets heavier, yours gets lighter. Or if you accomplish some things, then that takes from my pile. The truth of the matter is, maybe in the three-dimensional world that may be true, but in spiritual matters, in God's world, if we all lined up from Bangor, Maine, or Boston down to Key West, there's enough of God's sunlight on a sunny day to give us all a really bad sunburn. So it's unlimited resource when it comes to matter of spirit. That may be true on a balance sheet, in the three-dimensional world. But if I can learn that in God's world, there's abundance instead of scarcity, then I can get some emotional sobriety from that. And I don't have to try to take from you to get for me. The question was posed to me, do you want relief or do you want release? I said, well, I'll settle for relief here in the beginning. But after we get some sober time, we're looking for release from care, boredom, and worry, to be released from it. I know that we have a temporary, a daily reprieve and such as that. But there's something to do for emotional sobriety that has to do with feeling like we've been released from it rather than having the temporary state of relief. If you went into a corrections meeting in a facility, in a jail or a prison, and said, all right, who here in this meeting, I've got this cleared with the warden, who would like to have some relief from the bondage of prison that you're in and leave here with me for a weekend of meetings out in the regular world? Who'd like to have some relief? Oh, I do. I want to go. But if you went into that same group and said, who would like to be released? Not for the weekend, but who would like to be released from the bondage of self? And I think the participation would be a lot stronger. Relief for me is temporary. I can't use meetings for relief. I have to use step work for release. Meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous are not a source of a good steady source for me to have emotional sobriety. If I pull in like it's a NASCAR pit stop, I'm in the rat race, driving as hard as I can, and I whip into the pits and I make the sign to the pit master saying I need 4 new tires and a tank full of gas. And they put me new tires on and a tank full of gas, like going to a meeting for an hour. And then I roar off and go back into the rat race. I might have a little relief, but that's not release because I'm rejoining the rat race. But whenever I work step work with a sponsor or someone that I try to help and work with, there's more of a sense of release than there is being relieved for a temporary point of time. I'll say this, I know there's a separation between, I've mentioned personality, soul, this sort of thing, 2 people, multiplicity of people inside. That doesn't mean that I'm schizophrenic or have the 3 faces of Eve or whatever. But I do know this, and one of my teachers gave me this, and it's a tremendous gift. And if it'll pass to you, that's great. He would pinch his arm and say, this is the spacesuit. It's not the astronaut. And he was trying to differentiate between the 3-dimensional world that we live in, and that there's a 4th dimension. That my body is not all there is to it. That there's a source of spirit within us. And thank God for that. I'm so glad for that because my spacesuit has had some problems. In 2015, I was notified I had cancer and I had enough radiation where I should glow in the dark. But it worked. I don't have cancer anymore. I recently, about 6 years later, find out I need to have a heart valve replaced. But that's all about the spacesuit. It may need some repairs, but I feel like today, my soul and my spirit and my emotional sobriety is in a good space where it doesn't need a total overhaul. And I'm not going to be overly concerned about my spacesuit when the day comes when it wears out, because there's so much more to living than just the body. Body, mind, and spirit are all 3 come together for this physical plane experience that we can really have a really good time with emotional as well as physical sobriety. Whenever I was young, one of the things that just amazed me was a prism. It was the 3-sided prism. And whenever you held it up to the light, it would refract the colors of the rainbow. If you've never played with one, do so. It's amazing. Behold the prism. I think my job, what I aspire to be is I want to be a prism. I want to clean my prism up to where I can hold it up to the sunlight of the Spirit and let the light shine through it and refract the rainbow to my fellow travelers. I want it to help light the path that they're trudging on. And if they say, oh, wow, such beautiful colors, the rainbow, I would hope to have the humility of the prism and say, hey, I'm glad that you enjoyed the rainbow, but be clear about this. I am not the rainbow. Not only that, I am not the light, I am not the source either. The light is the source. The creator is the source. So if we stay cleaned up enough, we can let the light of God pass through us and share beautiful colors and experiences with other fellow travelers without having to take any credit for it and just be grateful. And there's a certain peace and emotional sobriety that comes from that. A sense of belonging, being wanted, needed, and loved, a sense of value that I could never have whenever I was on the left-hand side of step one. So that's enough for me tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to try to share with you. And I want to hush up so I can hear from some of the rest of you, because I'm here to listen and learn as well. So God bless you. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
It is
Thanks, Rick.
it is part of the tradition of this group that you take this opportunity to call on a few people that you would like to hear from. Are you do you feel confident and comfortable doing that?
I don't know how confident I'll be, but I'll give it a try. I know I'd like to hear from Mary Thayer, please.
Hi there, Mary Thayer, alcoholic. Thanks, Rick. Really, boy, that was packed. I was thinking about, let's see. You were talking about the inspector and watching, and not necessarily being, the judge, but you're supposed to look at something anyways to see whether or not it's something in your life that you want to be around. But I remember Beverly would say something to me like that. She didn't necessarily say, she didn't say be an inspector. She said, you better take somebody's inventory. I said, what? She must be cracked today. What's she talking about? She said, she says, if you are going to have a relationship with someone, you need to not verbally do it, but find out enough about them to find out if they're compatible with you. They don't have to be identical, but they have to be compatible. And I remember that was very scary for me. That was so scary for me. And the reason is that it took a while for me to find out who and what my values were and my principles were in this program. And the principles and the values and the way I was living in the first 5 years, definitely when I was 10 years sober, I wasn't living like that anymore. And so my values and how I live my life and what I do today are more on line of spiritual principles and values that we gain as we continue to do this work. And so I'm not necessarily I don't care what somebody else does. If somebody's going to be in my life more than just to say hello at the grocery store and meetings and stuff or whatever, I better know what their values and principles are and whether or not I'm compatible with them. Because if I'm not, it's going to be a very rocky road for me. And I'm not really being, I don't think, fair to anybody or to myself on certain levels. So that was an interesting take on what you said. There are some that are bruised. I'd prefer to have the bruised orange, perhaps, instead of the other, as you said. But I have to be well enough acquainted and find out and listen enough in order to, and watch. It's one of the biggest things I think I found is that, you know, when I first came in here, I thought all drunks were just wonderful. I mean, you know, there were some wonderful people when I sobered up, I'll be honest with you. You know, Chuck Chamberlain, who did that, he used to say, you know, that was how he opened his talk. I felt disconnected from God, myself, and others. And, you know, and there were people like that that were talking and everything. So I thought everybody was just a saint. And Bev said, no, honey, we're all drunks. What? And then, you know, I love the doctor's opinion. We're all outright mental defectives. And obviously, I don't know why we're trying to be popular with all the outright mental defectives, but here we are. No, I loved what you said. I too believe that emotional sobriety has to do, my emotional sobriety, if I want to take a look at it from the helicopter or whatever, has to do with how much God I have on board. Whenever I feel when I have that feeling that that I'm not in a place of neutrality, safe and protected, as it says, you know, because we enter the world of the spirit. If we've done enough of these steps, we do have, there's a God on board. And when I can really feel that presence, as you were talking about, I liked how you brought out the different areas with the feeling. When I feel that, I'm pretty neutral, you know, I'm neutrality about a lot of stuff. And for me, when I'm not feeling that, I know I'm coming from fear, not faith and trust. I love your demonstration. I heard that before about getting in the car. And I also realized that just because I have faith didn't necessarily mean I could trust God to get it done, my time frame. But so I've had different levels with that. And we'll continue, because there are days and there are events that come about that knock me off that place of neutrality. And, but it comes, for me today, it usually means I'm going to defend, and, you know, it's not them, but, you know, I'm going to defend. And when I start defending, I know that somehow I'm building a story on why I have to be right. So perhaps all this is just really about that word humility, you know, in some ways. Can I accept where I am right now? That takes an awful lot of courage. There are days when I don't want to accept where I am. Even nights when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, God, can we sleep? What, through a night? Crying out loud, this getting old crap is something. But anyway, other than that, it was a joy to hear you. Thank you. Thanks for your share, Rick. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Mary. While we're heading that same direction, I'd like to also hear from Missy.
Hi there, everyone. My name's Missy. I'm an alcoholic. And Rick, it was wonderful to hear you tonight. Some of what you said escaped me, but that's because I'm watching a lot and trying to stop the critic in my head from making judgments, not on you, of course, but it's really been nice getting to know you. And I was struck by a couple of things I was struck by a lot of what you said, and it brought me back to my early days in AA and my journey as of today, really. And, you know, thank God we hear people's stories in here, because when I came into the program, I was absolutely terrified. I knew I was finished with drinking. But I didn't trust God at all. I didn't even really have a God in my life. And I would sit in the halls here in my hometown and I would hear people's stories. And I had been paying doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists and everybody else probably since I was a late teenager, 16, 17, 18 years old. And I would pay money. I got married at 18 and, my life was just I was just a big loser. It was awful. And the only thing that kept me alive was alcohol. I mean, I couldn't imagine living in this world without something in my system just to get me out the door in the day. But I would pay money to these doctors and whoever, and they would tell me to go home and do things. And I had no solution. And I had nobody that would understand me. And I had a persona and a survival skill just to live in this world, which was so frightening to me. So when I'm sitting in the halls in those early days and I would hear people's stories, the first person I totally identified with was a huge, big man who was a biker. And I got sober in the summer and he had chains and he had the big Harley and I judged him. I thought, oh my God, he's scary. And he was sitting way in the back of the room. I had no idea. I never saw him again. He blew into Marblehead on a beautiful summer day, I guess. And he was sitting in the back and he talked. I didn't even dare look around to him. And I thought everything this man said, who I thought was really creepy, was he was talking to me. And I thought later on, many years, I thought about that man. I still think about him today. And I think about how wonderful this power we have is that just sort of shows us the way with these gentle souls that are all like us, that are alcoholic, that no doctor ever was able to reach me. A lot of them didn't have any idea about alcoholism. And it took me to get here in this program. And then to be, as Mary says, a seasoned beginner. I've got 42 years of sobriety, but I am not done. I haven't arrived anywhere. And as long as I'm on this earth, I am going to be for program. And I think back on some of the things I have had to do by suffering in AA and not picking up a drink. And they used to tell me, if you don't pick up a drink, you don't use, and of course, Mary would add, if you don't kill yourself, because I used to tell her I was going to kill myself. She'd hang the goddamn phone up on me, which was horrible, by the way. It was horrible. And because I would sit there, say, I'm going to kill myself. And she said, well, don't do that today. Don't drink, don't use, and don't. Oh, it was terrible. See how I am? That's it. That's the critic. And I didn't. I was so angry at her that I wouldn't drink. Oh my God. But to go through that stuff sober was torture, absolute torture. And after many torturous days and nights and dark nights of the soul, believe me, sitting on my living room floor, my children were asleep, rocking like somebody in a mental hospital would be doing in the back ward with a pillow around me. I mean, and then having to get up and go to work in the morning. And the suffering, and finally just said, all right, whatever you are, God, just take it, because I cannot deal any longer with this stuff. And to be able to learn slowly but surely, and do not pick up a substance. And we get through this day to day to day. And now I know what I have to do. I have a kit of spiritual tools. I want to work with this God. And as I get older, my life has become a lot smaller. I lost my husband. I talk about that a little bit a while ago. That was devastating. And then COVID arrived, and I'm sitting here by myself as a new widow, going through a lot of grief. And there was a presence with me. And I was calm. And I remember calling Mary Thayer one night and saying to her, do you think I really loved Jack? And she said, why would you say it? Yes, of course. I said, well, I'm not really grieving too much right now. I mean, I'm okay. I mean, really? I mean, you'd see why I drank, for God's sakes. I mean, and all those things. And I think it was the presence of this power that I have come to know that takes care of me, takes care of all of us. I'm so blessed to have tumbled into AA, to hear the stories from the bikies, the people I would never, walking in those doors in those early days, ever talk to, because, I was scared and I did not like that person, didn't even know him, but I made an assumption. And then to be able to identify with every single thing that man said. We are tricked in here. We get in here and we get tricked. And it's all from our power that wants us to get sober so that we can have these wonderful sober experiences and help others. I don't know what I would do without this program. I wouldn't be here. And I just want to get more and more and more and more and more. And I'm just so grateful to get to know you, to be on this Zoom. I love this. I'm okay. I wear my mask and I'm okay and I'm alone and I'm fine. And I know that there's something around me that's bigger than me and I'm going to be okay. And all of us are. What a gift we have. I'm so glad I'm a drunk and sober. So thank you, Rick, and I'm sure I'll see you again real soon. Thanks.
John, will you take it back and share first yourself? I'd like to hear from you with your experience on this emotional sobriety before you start picking on others.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone that shared. When you were sharing, I was reminded of a couple of things, and one of the biggest things that kind of came to the forefront of my memory is, I went to, I'm an artist, and I went to art school, and it was the worst thing I could have done for my art. And I have a master's degree in art. Woohoo! And I came out of art school, and I'm looking at your little diagram: feel, think, act. I came out of art school, and the only thing that was there was think and think and think and think about it. Because when I was in graduate school, they installed a huge critic into me who knew all the rules and who knew all the theories about art, who knew how to mix paints correctly and how to make sure that the printer was putting out the proper inkjet settings to get the black perfect. The problem was, as a result of that, I couldn't make anything. And everything that I did make for probably a year after coming out of art school was just remixing old stuff. There was nothing new. And I moved up to New York, the epitome of the art critic, and I completely shut down. I couldn't do hardly anything. And I spoke with my peers, and that is a common thing, that the critic has gotten so substantiated with all the information that feeling, which is required of a creating artist, becomes non-existent. You can no longer feel. And I was thinking about that while you were talking, and you were talking about values and the values that I have, and what I was reminded of is the part in the book when it says, if an owner of a business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. And I thought to myself, oh my God, yeah, I've been fooling myself about values. I've been listening to this thing that's talking, and I've been listening to it and letting it tell me what my real desires are, when in fact that's not true. And it's just, that line just now just took on a whole new meaning for me, that I've been fooling myself about values because I've been judging instead of feeling, thinking. I don't really trust my thinking at this point because I've been humiliated quite a bit this week. I mean, I've got some real humiliation going on. So I'm kind of humbled by my own humiliation. As a matter of fact, I'm terrified of me right now But anyway, I'm like mortified. I'm like, oh, don't let her leave the house. I mean, I'm so glad that like kind of COVID's got to shut in because I can't really screw up anybody. But I was with my mom today. I feel sorry for her. I don't know what she had to deal with. It was probably all lies. Anyway, but what is happening for me is I'm starting to not let that inside thinking, critical, judging, nasty part of me make all the decisions. I don't know how much she's doing, but she is losing her footing because I am starting to see her. I do go back to sleep quickly. I go right back to sleep, and then something hurts, then I'll say something and I'll be like, So currently, as far as emotional sobriety is concerned, I am really understanding how paralyzed I am by dependencies and demands. I am just like paralyzed. And it's good news because all the material that is happening is, recovery is like a verb in my life today. It is happening. And I'm trying to, just be here, be awake, be present. And I am really, really wary of the term do the next right thing because I'm the girl that my critic has a whole host of agents that she sends out to fix things. So I'm like, just sit still, just stay still, don't do anything until like maybe you talk, get some real advice and where someone else is interceding on my values a little bit. I have been in near desperate prayer. And but I'm under the capital S surrender team right now. So I'll just see how that plays out. But thank you for talking, Rick. And thanks to everyone that shared. And I'm really curious to see what Mitchell has to say about this.
Okay, he's coming. 1 second. Here he is.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I'm Mitchell. Hi, everybody. Rick, it was just a wonderful delight to listen to you. I just loved the peace and the sense of perspective and just the joy emanating out of you. And like you, I never called myself a judge-o-matic, but I would call myself Rambo. I'm more like a Rambo. I'm like, let's, I take no hostages. Some people are sulkers. I'm really a Rambo. And, what I was kind of really thinking about was just, you talked about the 10 step and it made me think of an experience when I was early sober. I worked with a woman who wasn't doing her job. I was on a crisis hotline working at a rehab. I was probably under a year sober. And this lady was not doing her job, and I was answering all the calls. And she just sat there kind of drinking coffee and eating donuts. And I found myself at one point screaming at her at the top of my lungs in white hot anger in the middle of the room. And I just left my body with anger. And I had the good sense to call my sponsor after somebody pulled me and sat me down. And my sponsor said to me, you have no right to talk to another human being that way. And then I was about to go into, like you said, I had all the reasons lined up of why I was justified. And he said, I want you to just stop for a second and breathe. And just kind of just breathe and let's say a prayer together. And we said some prayer, I don't know what it was. And he said, you're going to need to go and talk to her and face her and ask her to forgive you for losing your temper and say that you were 100% wrong for it. And is there anything you can do to kind of clean it up? And I was probably sober 8-9 months at the time. And I sat there resisting, and then I kind of sat and he stayed on the phone with me, and we breathed, and he said some prayer with me. I don't know what he said to me. And I walked over to Joanne and I talked to her. And I found myself moving from hot white anger to a place of calm. And I had never experienced it was possible, because I was very thirsty at that moment. That was the moment when like scotch and a rock sounded good to me. And I never, ever experienced a shift of states ever, from praying, admitting I was wrong, asking her to forgive me. And I was just saying it. I was saying it as sincerely as I could, which was probably half sincere, but it didn't matter. I was sincere enough to listen to my sponsor, and why I'm saying this is because, you know, there are experiences of peace and emotional sobriety, calm, that come from those moments when I'm experiencing the power of the program and the spirit of my life that give me a trust in the process. And like you said, the difference between faith and trust. And I've had a series of experiences that have made me a believer, and that where, like in the 12-step, it says kindness, courtesy, and justice will bring you into harmony with almost anyone. And the state of, you know, in the 12 and 12, in the state of having that open heart, being willing to forgive when the fault is elsewhere, finding that that willingness to open my spirit up to experience civility towards someone, to feel that, those experiences have been always transformational to me, and it's a state of being to want to be forgiving. It's a state of being to realize that other people are frequently sick and wrong, as I am. It's a state of being to want to offer the same generosity of someone makes a mistake, that I want to be treated with love and acceptance. And so it's a real grace to be a Rambo in recovery, let me tell you, to have all these misdirected instincts and all these misperceptions of situations begin to be changed by the Spirit. And that's what's made me feel so devoted to AA, is that, and devoted to our way of life, is that I can be changed. And I participate, but you know, I don't draw up the schematic. I just, somehow my heart gets open. And so anyway, your sincerity and kindness was really and experience, you know, was very inspiring to me. So thank you. Do I pick on somebody? No, I don't pick anybody. Okay. Oh, you pick on
Dawn
somebody.
does.
Oh, Dawn does. Okay, thanks.
No, Mitchell, go ahead and pick on somebody. How about it?
Okay, I'm gonna pick my wife.
Good. I was gonna pick your wife too, so that's good.
Here you go. I guess I was meant to speak today. I'm Susan. I'm an alcoholic. Rick, that was so beautiful on so many levels. Gosh, I don't even know where to start, but what I really loved was that I loved all the diagrams, but I loved that last diagram around the thinking, acting, and feeling, and how when you do it in the reverse, how tied up in knots one can become. And I had this experience right before I got in this meeting that was a perfect example of it, that, you know, someone kind of sent me a text where I felt like I was being criticized and that I did something wrong. And so instead of kind of going through the process in a sober fashion, thinking it through, acting, appropriately, and then having my feelings about it, my feelings just went into high gear about feeling rejected. Okay. And, being criticized, and that, my own critics started to pop up. And the first thing I did was, send the text back, without even thinking about it. And it ended up putting out a whole, host of, the reaction and the next action and the next action. And next thing I know, I'm caught up in this whole story, which isn't even true. It's only true in my own, messed up brain. And, it certainly wasn't acting in emotional sobriety, but it's so easy to get wrapped up in that. And so easy to feel poor me and feel like a victim and feel like I did something wrong when I didn't do anything wrong. Like you had said, it's about them. A lot of times I'd like to say, it has nothing to do with me. It is, it is about them. And I love the acronym Q-tip, quit taking it personal. Like it has, most of the time, what's going on with other people and how they respond is about them, and it has nothing to do with me. But because of my, crazy alcoholism, and because of my crazy, immature, old ideas, I tend to get locked in and unable to, change. And as you talked about, the soul versus the persona, and Mary Thayer talks about it all the time too. It's like get locked in this idea of that bodysuit and who we are and how we think we have to show up in this world, and what we are, what we are and what we're not, and what we really are is none of those things. We are that, that beautiful child of God that is, our soul, and that's where the connection is. And had I done that, had I taken that experience and taken a breath and had a conversation with somebody and talked to God about it, I probably wouldn't have responded at all, and would have been able to work this thing out very differently. But we're human, and that's our humanity, and that's our our alcoholism, and it's a day at a time to do things differently. Thanks.
Susan, you want to call on somebody?
Sure. Let's see. How about Linda S? Where'd she go? Oh, is she there, Kurt, or is it just you?
She went down to get some dinner.
Okay, how about you by default then?
How about, do you want to share, honey? No?
I'm gonna go.
Okay.
That soup's gonna burn.
Okay, go for it. I'm gonna pass. I've been in and out of the meeting from office to the house. I just
Okay.
like to listen. Thank you.
All right, I'll pick somebody else.
Okay. that was it.
What? Where's David?
No.
Okay. Let's see. How about 1 second? I'm looking at my screen here. Is there anybody that wants to share? Oh, I'm just gonna pick somebody random. How about Irina from Hershey, PA?
Thank you. My name is Irena. I am an alcoholic. And Rick, I just learned so much from you this evening and from everyone else who shared. I actually took notes because I wanted to remember the things that you said. And one of the things that really struck me and is very useful to what I've been going through the last few days was wearing this third eye camera and projecting out into the world and then acting on what I thought I saw or what I created. As that for me was very powerful because I have been writing someone out of my life because I made up a story, which on reflection is a story that I made up and probably has nothing to do with my behavior or theirs. The other thing that I really liked was something that Mary said, that emotional sobriety is how much God you have on board, which really, really makes a difference in my life. And I think that's really all I have. I appreciate being called on, and I really appreciate your talk and the other comments that I heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irena. Can we hear from Veronica, just because I want to hear her accent?
Hi, Dawn. Hi, Rick. I'm Veronica, an alcoholic. Hi, everyone. I don't really have very much to say tonight. It's been a very full meeting, and it's been great to hear what you've all had to say. I don't know. I don't know why I want to make this comment, but you know, when you're talking about the helicopter ride, it took me back to when I lived in Hong Kong for 15 years before I moved to the USA 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago. And I remember, and I mean, Hong Kong is pretty intense. And I remember there's this International Financial Center, which is, you know, a very, very tall building. And I'd go up to the top of it and I'd look down. And I'd look down from the quiet of this office and I would, a couple of things, and I'd think, wow, Hong Kong's really very manageable. And second thing is like all those billions and billions of dollars out there. I don't know, but anyway, I guess it was nice to be reminded about perspective. And I find that when I am rocked emotionally, and definitely my emotional sobriety is pretty close, you know, closely being rocked behind that. There is no calm and there is no perspective, or there's less perspective. So I'm going to remember that one, the helicopter, and I like it. 500 feet is so manageable, you know, rather than, I mean, I can do that, 500 feet, you know, I don't even have to go up 30,000 feet like an airplane. So there's a couple of things I do actually. Oh, and I love the pinching the skin. You know, this is the suit, not the astronaut. I'm going to remember that one too. So anyway, lovely to be here and Happy New Year, everyone. And thanks for calling on me, Dawn.
And can we hear from Sam? And then Sam, once you share, you can close the meeting in your usual way.
Oh, thank you, Dawn. I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic. I was joking around with Dawn earlier. I sent her a message and said I just about put my mom in a box, mailed her to North Korea over, let them deal with her over Christmas. I'm not even shitting you guys. Like if you saw what my house looked like at Christmas with my parents and my in-laws and some of the I mean, it was like a Wes Anderson movie meets like something. I mean, it was complete freak show. All day long freak show with just people who were like sober, dry, kind of like some people who just don't drink but are really anxious and rigid. It was just a complete shit show. And there's a couple times where I wanted to like just hit the eject button, you know. I love what God, I just forgot his name. Our buddy from Vietnam. He always talks about JP, right? Yeah. He always says, you know, I can't give love. I have to be love. Like I have to get into that position. I know that may sound like semantics, but for me, it's not. Like I have to gear my position towards that and bring me in that place to other people. And, you know, this meeting is like an oxygen mask for me, you know, and I didn't realize how bad I needed a meeting until I went to this treatment center. You know, this letter is all about this. You know, it talks about an outgoing love to God's people and his universe. And I went to this, it was rainy here. You know, Christmas was a freak show. And I do this meeting in a male treatment center here every couple Tuesdays, and I hadn't been back to work, and I was like, man, I really don't want to go in the middle of the day to this meeting and go do this, you know, like just these guys, sometimes it's really entertaining and sometimes the guys just look at the floor, you know, and it just depends on how long they've been in there, you know what I'm saying? And the guys over Christmas, it was just one of those things where I'm just not in the mood for this shit right now. And when I went in there, I couldn't have been more lit up. Like it just was right there. I was like, God, this is exactly where I need to be with exactly who I need to be here with, you know, and I just, my heart, and that's one of the things that this letter and all this stuff teaches me is that I love this. Ralph White always says, well-trained feet, even when I don't feel like it, I don't have a good attitude, well-trained feet, you know, like I meditate in the morning, no matter what. If I don't feel like it, if I don't like people, it doesn't matter. If I meditate and all I do is scream profanity at people I don't like while I meditate, I let that roll. You know what I mean? Like but I make myself sit down and do that. I have a prayer life, and I think that a very serious prayer life. And I've been really getting into this, the unpopular studies thing, you know, and I've always been a big fan of Michael Singer. So I'm trying to watch this stuff come up, you know, and then and it's funny when you watch it, how complex the human psyche and soul is, just the stuff that it kicks out, you know, I mean, especially when you have all these family members and all this crazy stuff, you know. There's that movie Top Gun, you know, where I used to watch when I was a kid, and these guys would, they were jet fighters, right? And they would hit the eject button. Like if they were shot and they were going down, they'd hit the eject button and it would shoot them out of the chair. I was at dinner the other night with my mom and this other woman and my dad, and my dad made not, so he didn't mean to, but he's just old and Southern. He made a funny comment about this lady's fruit tea who we were sitting next to, and she was, you know, super offended by the comment that he made. And then my mom was just like talking to the air, just rambling. And I'm just like, all of a sudden something happened, and I just heard that, like, come on, Maverick, we got to eject, man. We got to eject. They've got missiles on us right now. Hit the eject button right now. And I just shoot out of the chair and like completely out of that whole dinner, you know? Anyway, but we made it through it, and I tried to be as loving, as considerate as I could. I made a few lapses, and you know, but I really like what JP says. When I start to get filled up and I start to shed a lot of these dependencies and just let people be who they are, and I start to give love, I start to get that warmth and that glow back to me, and I start to breathe again. I start to be a likable guy again, you know, and that resonates with people that I'm around. And I can really I sense and feel the presence of God in that feeling of gratitude and warmth and peace when I'm serving people that I'm not expecting anything in return from, you know, and I bring that with me. I become, all of a sudden, I'm like, I am love. And then I am love around the people that I'm with. I'm not contriving something. I'm not giving them, I'm not putting on an act. It just is there. I'm like that warm glow. I'm all filled up, and I'm ready to just be a patient, loving, kind guy. And when that's out, it's fucking gone. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were on red light this week. So I'm just so grateful for this meeting. So grateful to hear all of you. Rick, beautiful share, man. I really enjoyed everything you said, and I appreciate you coming tonight. And the way that we end this meeting is we go to our inner room. It used to sound like, you know, with all these, when Zoom first came out, everybody would pray off mute, you know, and there's that delay, and it sounded like some kind of a schizophrenic acid trip, you know, kind of thing. And some people were breaking in and out and all kind of weird, you know, feedback and stuff. So I thought it's more peaceful to just kind of go to our inner room. And for those who care to join me, we can go in there for a moment, take a few deep breaths, and recite the Lord's Prayer to ourselves. Amen. Thank you guys for a great meeting.
Thanks, Rick. Good night, everybody.
You.
Thanks again, Rick. See you next year,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rick. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Rick.
Meeting, Don.
Thank you very much.
Right.